If you are tired of making poor fabric choices for your sewing patterns, I understand your pain because that was me too. So in this video, I've broken it down into sort of three main points that what are the actual things that you need to be looking at when you're trying to choose and decide the right fabric for the right sewing pattern, so you can just start to make better choices and understand fabric choice. Welcome back, my sewing friends. What a delight to actually see all your faces again. As always, if you are new here, welcome. My name is Evelyn Wood and I'm the creator of VintageSewingSchool.com, and here on this channel we talk about vintage sewing skills, like the skills that we need to help improve your garment sewing. So if that's something you're interested in, do check and see if you have hit the subscribe button down below, because we have many more videos, obviously, to improve your sewing. And today's topic is fabric. Fabric has been very much top of mind for me of late. And I recently just asked you all, what are your questions about fabric? Because we all know it is really hard to learn. You can't really know fabric until you touch and feel it yourself, and it does take a long time, and it is quite hard to learn. It is one of the harder points of sewing to learn, I think. And so one of the big areas that you all asked about was choosing the right fabric for the right design and sewing pattern. Like, what are you actually looking for? So I've broken it down into a few main points here. And now, when you're learning fabric, I will stress first of all that knowing names of fabrics is important. It's not as important as you think. What's really important is understanding the qualities, knowing the qualities of the fabric that you're looking for. Because let's face it, they will call fabrics all types of different names. It doesn't mean that that one name, it could mean many different things. That like one chiffon is not the same as everything. It's the different qualities that that particular chiffon might have. So it's about understanding the different qualities. And this will make more sense as we go through. So when you're learning fabrics in your sewing journey, don't hold a lot onto just particular names of fabric. While it's useful, understanding the qualities that you're looking for is what you really, really want to learn. And that's when you'll really start to see a lot of success in your choices. So this is like a brief overview of all of the things, like the areas that I think you should be looking at. This is what I look at when I'm choosing fabric for the right design. So the main points. So each of these points are like entirely individual categories that space out and are all individual learning things as well, but this is kind of an overview so you can start to checklist off and get in your mind what to look for when you're choosing fabric for a sewing pattern. So I'm going to break this down into knits and wovens because they are different. But first of all, let's please talk about the difference between a fiber and fabric. So this is an area of confusion when you first start because one, you've never known how fabric is made, and pattern companies will often just say linens or cottons. These aren't fabrics at all. These are fibers. A linen could be woven into a lightweight, into a medium weight, into a heavyweight fabric. It could be knitted into a knit. This is not very helpful when describing what fabric to get by describing the fiber. So what do I mean here? Let's quickly talk about how fabric is made for those of you that aren't quite sure of this process yet. So there's three stages of how fabrics are made. One is you start with the raw ingredients, the fibers. This is cotton, linen, silk, wool, polyester, rayon, viscose. All of these are fibers. These fibers are then spun and twisted into yarns. These little threads coming out of this fabric here, these are yarns. This is a yarn. So then these yarns, this is the second stage, are then either knitted or woven into fabric, and that is how we get fabric. So fabric names include things like chiffon, georgette, crepe, denim, taffeta. There's just, all of those types of names are our fabric types. And so you have fiber types and fabric types. And when you look at fabrics, you've got those two things to consider, because the fiber type really does play a lot in how the fabric handles, and particularly in moisture absorption, whether it's like cool or warm, and the drapey fibers include rayon. For example, a plain woven fabric in a light to medium weight. In rayon is very drapey. The same thing in cotton is not. So these fabric types are made pretty much the same, but here it's the fiber that is causing this difference in the drape, in how it looks. And so it's very important to understand the difference between the fiber and the fabric and the names of different things. And you should make your own lists as you go along to help you get this in your mind. But that plays a big part in what you're looking for and how the fabric handles. And so both the fiber type and the fabric type affect the qualities that you will look for in your fabric. And so knowing, if you see linen, for example, you'll know that it has a natural drape. If you see rayon, viscose, you'll know that it has a natural drape. No matter how the fabric is constructed, it will still want to have a beautiful drape and handle to it. Things like this, you'll then start to know when you see the fiber type if it might be stiffness or structured. Or drapey. You'll start to know these different things, and we'll get into more about that in the different categories coming up, how to look for it. So start to understand the difference between fibers and fabric types. Make yourself lists so you know what are the names of the fibers, what are the names of the different fabrics, and so you can start to understand. And when you're looking at all these things and trying to buy fabric, you'll know what each are talking about. Trust me, it makes it a lot easier. Okay, let's start off with how to choose wovens. So woven fabrics are, well, think of like, if you're not sure yet, woven fabrics, think of like a basket weave. All of these little yarns, like we talked about, are woven. So that means it goes up, down this way, and up, down this way. And they're kind of crisscross like a basket weave is the simplest way to put it. And this is your fabric that frays, and it doesn't usually stretch. That is a woven fabric. And now we usually choose a woven fabric for weight and the drape or stiffness. Let's start with the weight. What do we mean when we say the weight of fabric? So the weight of fabric is usually described as GSM, grams per square meter, or ounces per square yard, imperial and metric, of course. So I'm going to use GSM because that makes sense for me and I can say that very easily. So it is if you have 1 square yard or 1 square meter, in my case, of fabric, how much does that fabric weigh? Because then it's like for like, right? And so different fabrics are going to weigh different amounts. A lightweight versus a heavyweight. Generally, your lightweight fabrics are, tend to often be sheer because they are so light. And as you get heavier, of course, they are big, thick, heavy outerwear jackets. And so knowing all of the weight categories and all of this is an entirely different video in itself, of course, and something you should delve into, particularly when buying online. That weight, that GSM, is very, very handy. And so that will give you a reference of how heavy it is and maybe how sheer it is as well. Lighter fabrics always tend to be a little bit more just lighter, more see-through, so something to be very careful with. Heavier fabrics, of course, are more suited for outerwear and coats. You're not going to make a top out of denim, for example, because it will probably be very thick and heavy. So the weight of fabric is appropriate for the type of garment that you're making. A top, a blouse, you probably want something lighter. A coat or jacket, you want something heavier. And having a look at those weights is how we determine what fabric to start with. And then for wovens, we go into drape or stiffness. So you either have drapey fabrics or you have stiff and structured fabrics. And so the drape, as we just have been talking about, is determined by both the fiber type and how the fabric is constructed. So the tighter woven fabrics, so when all of those yarns are really tightly woven, like lots of them are packed in to a small amount of fabric, usually results in a stiffer fabric. So you're going to have things like your organzas, your cottons, plain weave cottons, all of these types of ones are stiff and structured. You can see that they just don't really want to drape much. They hold their shape and form. And so when you talk about woven fabrics, you generally want, for looser fit garments, like bigger and baggier fit garments, just as a general rule, something with more drape is what you're going to want, because when it's big and baggy, it will fall down and have that nice float around your body, right? Where if it's big and baggy and bigger than your body and you have something stiff and structured, You guessed it, that's when you start to get that potato sack look and it doesn't really feel very nice. I'm sure we've all made the mistake pretty much of using a quilting cotton for a blouse or something, like a bigger blouse, and it's just like potato sack, right? So as a general rule, and then as you get a tighter fit garments, you want a more structured, stiffer fabric because it will hold the shape of darts. It will contour and hold the shape of your body around, and that is what you need. Trying to make something tight and fitted in this is going to be a nightmare because it just will not hold its shape. It's just not made for it. So as a general rule, the looser fit, the bigger, the baggier things are, the more drape you probably want in your fabric, the tighter and more body form your wovens are, the pattern is, the more you'll probably want a more structured fabric that holds its shape, so it will hold that structure for you. So there's a few key points when looking at patterns. Look for how big the garment is against the model. Can you see outlines of how big the garment is versus the model? Look for drape lines. Do you have these sort of like squiggly lines and shadowing through the garment? That indicates drape. That is what it's showing. Have a look at your hemlines. Are they wavy or are they dead straight? If they're dead straight, it probably indicates a more structured fabric. If they are actually wavy, so to say, that is indicating, again, drape and flow to the fabric. And so you should probably be looking for fabrics that are more like that. So that's really how you start looking at the pattern illustrations and determining what you need, of course, for the fabric. I could keep talking forever about this, obviously, but I think they're the main points, and I think you get the idea of what you're looking for in a woven now. So what are we looking for when we're deciding on a knit fabric? Well, knits are mostly determined by weight, and then by stretchiness and drape. So similar but not quite the same. So knit fabrics are constructed, all of your yarns, where are my knit fabrics? So knits are constructed by knitting all of those yarns together. And so you'll probably most likely know because knits have a natural stretch to them. Because they're not woven, they're actually knitted and knotted together. There's areas that are like looped around and it allows like that stretch to the fabric. And knits don't fray either. So when you try and pull the edges, they don't fray. Now the amount of stretchiness depends a lot, and we'll talk about that as we go through. So as I said, weight and stretchiness drape are how you determine what kind of knit fabric to use for your garment. Let's start with weight. As we've talked about, the weight means how heavy the fabric is. And usually then how thick, that sort of means how thick the fabric is, of course, as well. And so this is most important when choosing a knit because it depends on what type of garment it is. You could have a knit loose top or a knit dress, for example. And depending on how tight it is, might depend on how thick you want the fabric. When it comes to knits and stretching over your body, weight and therefore thickness is really determined by, think about showing all of the lumps and bumps and how clingy the fabric is to you. That is what we're really looking at here. So if I was to stretch this knit here, this is quite a lightweight. I can see every little bump and lump underneath this one here. And imagine if this was in leggings or something tight like this, you're going to see everything. So it might not be the choice that you're looking for. Whereas this one here, this double knit, is really thick. It's twice double knit, about twice the thickness of the other one. And when I stretch this over my hand here, I can't see as many lumps or bumps at all. It is much more structured, it's sturdy, it feels more supportive. And so if I was going for something tight over my body, I would probably want more like this. And so weight is usually the first port of call in deciding which knit to go for. Once you've decided on the weight, then you'll look at the stretchiness and or drape. So, well, let's start with drape because that's quite easy. It goes in the same with what we've just talked about with wovens. So it is just how drapey it is. And again, generally the looser the fit, so you can still have a loose fit knit garment, the looser it is, the more that you'll want that drape. And so drape is determined by perhaps the fibres that are included. For example, with knits, the addition of rayon, a viscose, modal, bamboo, these types of fibres will really enhance the drape of your fabric. I have one here. This is a half modal, half cotton with some spandex. This is just 100% cotton with spandex. Now, I don't know if you can see already the difference in these, but if you have a look at this, this tiny little ball. So this is really quite drapey, whereas if I do the same with the 100% cotton, it's stiffer. Look at this, it just doesn't want to drape as much. So if I had a top out of this, it would again stay out and hold its shape, whereas this one is going to fall really nice and just look really nice over my body. And so drape comes into consideration. And then we have the stretch factor. So this is again a whole other category on itself, but you need to determine the amount of stretch, and the stretch percent is quite important. So you have, super stretch knits, moderate stretch knits, stable knits. That is a whole other thing. So, but you need to determine the amount of stretch for the garment and the use. So if it is indeed going to stretch and be tight fit around your body and stretch over your body, you're going to need something super stretchy. If you are looking for an easy sew that may even still be with a zip or some other opening or just looser, you don't need as much stretch, and there might be other considerations to make. So how stretchy it is determines both the construction of the fabric and if it has the addition of elastane fibers. So elastane, spandex, lycra, these fibers are generally what are considered make it stretchy or not. And so these two both here have elastane, about 8% of elastane in them. It makes them super stretchy. They stretch in both directions, right? That's what you call a four-way or a two-direction. And then they can stretch in two directions. And then this one, look at this. Barely even stretches this way and only stretches this way. So this is what you call a one direction, or sometimes only classed as a two-way knit. But again, this is where I talk about the qualities are the most important to look for, because if you just say cotton jersey, how do you know how many ways this stretches and how much it stretches? It doesn't. That doesn't determine anything. So this is where you need to know what you're looking at. So the amount of stretch will depend, of course, on the garment. And most patterns will, of course, indicate a stretch guide for you to make it really easy, because they have worked out the pattern will have a certain amount of stretch it needs to fit you properly. So I hope that really helps determine the stretch amount. As I did mention, these are entire categories on themselves that you need to look and dive into, but this is a gloss over just a little bit so you can start understanding the things that you're actually looking for in when you're looking, like determining wovens, as I said, are determined by weight and drape or structure. That's what we usually look at, those 2 points mostly when deciding. Knits are mostly determined by weight, and then stretchiness and drape are the points that we're looking at, the qualities that you're looking at to decide which is the best fabric for the right garment. If this is really exciting for you and you want to know more, as you can tell, I could talk forever about this. Fabric nerd alert here. I do invite you to come join me at Vintage Sewing School, because I've just released an entire course about all of this, going really deep, and there's checklists, there's charts, there's stretch guides, there's all types of things to really help you along in there. So I've left links down below for you to come join me there. And also there are links down below for other videos like grain lines, like pre-washing is a big question that come up before. So other videos that I think you'll really enjoy about fabrics as well. So let me know, my friends, which of these do you going to use the most in your sewing now moving forward, or let us know, how do you choose the best? Give us your own tips of choosing the best fabric for the right style, because sharing all of our information here is how we all get better at our sewing. So until next time, happy fabric shopping and happy sewing. Bye.